Aye. I said to you a while ago that I would talk about why I prefer the term social intolerance to all of the kind of separate terms that we've invented to discuss that, such as racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, I don't know, there's loads of them. They're all social intolerance, right? They're all the same thing. And splitting them up has not helped at all. In fact, it's been counterproductive. We have split them up partly because they were approached at different times. The first of these that really became developed into a movement was feminism, right? And nobody ever said, well, they're feminophobia. We just said it's sexism. And that happened around about the turn of the 19th, 20th century. The second one was racism. Black people in America, at that time it was only blacks, began to, in the United States of America that is, began to rebel against the kind of discrimination that was very much in practice at the time. Segregation of schools, segregation of drinking spaces, fountains, couldn't drink coffee in the same place, that sort of thing, you know. And that's where it started. They began to say, no, we have civil rights. Rights is a difficult word, but yes, people should not be discriminated against on the grounds of colour any more than they should be on the grounds of sex. As the 70s passed through, we got an increased presence and power by homosexual men, and that led us to the idea of homophobia, and then we got transphobia. I'm sure there's loads of other phobias all multiplying like mushrooms all over the place, but they're all social intolerance. They are all people around you rejecting you for what you are. Okay, it's all the same thing. The problem with using these different words is twofold. The first is that it makes it sound as if they're different things. They're not. It's all the same stuff. It's all equally bad, but it's still all the same. You know, it's not different bad. It's the same bad. And we should recognise that there's no real difference between being racist and being someone who discriminates against women. Same thing. You're discriminating against someone because of what that person is. Same is true of homophobia and transphobia. The problem exists because of a development of, the second issue is that because of a development in feminism, which started to happen in the 1970s, we now have a thing called intersectional politics. Now this grows out of identity politics. This is not directly the result of feminism, it grows out of feminism's adoption of identity politics, which is a function of reaction against social intolerance, but it's not a healthy one. This has allowed feminists to suggest that if you have two or more forms of intolerance placed upon you, right? They express it in terms of privilege and oppression, but I'm not going to use those terms because they're politically loaded, and it's an attempt by them to make us use language that they pre-approve. And if you know me at all, you know you ain't going to fucking get anywhere with that. So what they're basically doing is they're saying that if there is, they take the number of pressures that are on you, the number of different forms that the social intolerance is focused on, the different things that it's focused on, and then multiply them. So what they say is, therefore, a white woman is less oppressed than a black woman, because a black woman is oppressed because she's black and because she's a woman. A black lesbian woman would be oppressed because she's black, because she's lesbian, because she's a lesbian. That's bullshit, right? That's just wrong. Because what it's suggesting is that the amount, and they actually say this, that, you know, the people who are at what they call the intersections, that is, you know, if you're black and a woman, or if you're black gay and a woman, or a black trans and a woman, whatever, these intersections, and they actually say this, these are the most dangerous places to be, and it's absolute nonsense. This is just complete nonsense. Social intolerance is social intolerance, and it's basically even. If you look around the society around you, you'll find that societies are intolerant of other groups. It's across the board. I mean, they don't really care if you're a woman or a guy. If somebody hates blacks, they don't look. You know, they don't give a damn whether you're homosexual or straight black. They still hate you. You know, if somebody, if a man dislikes women, you know, I mean, you know, in terms of not in terms of being not sexually attracted to them, but dislikes them in terms of, you know, wanting to put them down. He doesn't care if you're black, white, yellow, green, lesbian. You're a woman. That's it. So it's not a multiplier in the way that these people have contrived it to be. And because of that, what it's doing is that it panders to the false logic of identity politics, which posits a hierarchy of oppression. Now, to start with, nobody in the West is oppressed. Nobody, right? If you want to find some oppressed people, I suggest you go to India or to Africa, South America, or I can take you to places in Asia, and there you will find oppressed people. You are not telling me that a single mother, black, living in a comfortable house provided by the state, living on and feeding her children through money given to her by the state, you cannot seriously tell me that person is oppressed in any way at all, even though, by your logic, she's sitting at the crossroads of a huge number of intersections. She's a single mother, she's black, she lives in a poor area, yet she's eating, and it's all being paid for by other people, right? That's not an oppressed person. I'm sorry, it just isn't. And throwing in all these false ideas of hierarchies of oppression, which identity politics serves to do, is a nonsense. It just muddies the water. What we're talking about is discrimination and social intolerance. You should not discriminate against people because of what they are. That's it. End of. Right? We're not, you know, you can't have your hierarchy of oppression. Sorry, can't have it. And those of us who oppose you, we need to fight you. I'm sorry, we just have to. I have always considered myself a liberal. But in recent years I've had to say, well, am I really? You know? Liberals now apparently don't like free speech. Well, I absolutely have to have free speech. That's the, for me, that's the, you know, why did we have the Cold War if we weren't going to have that? You know, it's existential. Anyway, I think we need to look at the language that we're using, and we need to kind of wrest it back from the activists, because they've taken control of it, and they're doing this in an incredibly politicized way, such that only they can ever win a debate. Right? That's how the left wins debates, by the way. It seizes control of the language, and therefore nobody can argue with it, because there is no actual argument that works in favour of left-wing ideology. It doesn't matter whether it's Marxism or one of the pseudo-Marxisms around. None of them actually work. And we can show, we can demonstrate that they don't work. You know, we have the historical examples. We have the historical record. We can show that the most successful culture that has ever existed is our culture. Right? That is modern Western European capitalism. That's the best culture the world has ever had. And we can use actual measures. You know, we can look at standards of living. We can look at infant mortality. We can look at average incomes. We can look at average size, weight and size. You know, it's quite a big important measure of how healthy a population is the average weight and size. We can look at the numbers of deaths from preventable diseases. We can look at the number of people living in in seriously substandard housing, you know, in stuff that isn't really houses. We can look at the number of people who have access to sanitation. Whole measure after measure after measure. Modern Western European culture, aka white culture, by the way, is the best in the world. It just is. And nothing else comes close. The experiments that have been done with communism and Marxism, in those what we find is that everything goes backwards. And the place gets worse off, and people are more miserable, and their standards are reduced in comparison to the West. That's what happened. That's why the Soviet Union collapsed. The Soviet Union didn't collapse because it went bankrupt. There's one reason. But the main reason was because it didn't work. Communism does not work. Look at China. It's no longer a communist country. Well, it calls itself communist, but it's state socialism. Communism don't work. It does not work. Vietnam is no longer a communist country. They say they're communist, but they're not. So the left does this. It seizes the language. It does its best to prevent people like me, and not particularly right-wing, by the way, who want to iterate an opposing case in order to silence people like me. The left wants to take away the language we need to have in order to do so. And that's what political correctness is, right? Political correctness is only an attempt to change language so that ideas that the left doesn't want to hear cannot be spoken out loud. Okay? That's all it is. It's got nothing to do with being polite or any of that shit. That's just the way they dress it up in politically correct language to make it sound better than it is. It's thought policing. Political correctness is just simple thought policing. So that's why I won't use terms, I dislike terms like transphobia and homophobia and all the rest of it. That's why I use social intolerance, because it's general, right? It implies a general resistance for a variety of reasons by society to groups within it, okay? And I would like to make clear that I think it's wrong that in most cases there are examples of social intolerance which are reasonable, okay? We're all pretty resistant to the idea of paedophiles, for example, and so we should be. They abuse and pirate on and damage vulnerable people who are supposed to be protected. So social intolerance of them, yes, absolutely, I think that's a great idea. We, generally speaking, are a bit intolerant of thieves and murderers. That's fine. Social intolerance is a mechanism that societies use to prevent people from doing bad things. What I am saying, where I will agree with everyone on the left, is that that mechanism should not be used to impinge on the lives of people who are not doing bad things to other people, because there is a right that comes before it, and that is the right to your own body. We all have the right to do everything we want and to say anything we want, as long as we do not impinge on the right of others to do the same, right? So, if what you're doing is not impinging on my right to get on with my life, then I have no right to be intolerant of you. It's not the same thing if you're a paedophile and you're menacing my kids. Well, yeah, I think I do. So, social intolerance is actually a positive function of society which is sometimes used inappropriately. We don't need words like racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, in particular the last two, because it's already covered. We already have the words social intolerance, and we should use those, because when we go along with the left's politically correct attempt to seize the language, we already give up the ground, right? It's like Nelson, before Trafalgar, instead of sailing into the Spanish line and attacking them, turning around and going back to Ireland, or wherever. It's ridiculous. You don't give the enemy you don't give away the enemy. Say, oh, fine, you want to have a fight here, well, I'll give you all my weapons. The only arguments we have, the only way we can couch our arguments, is in terms of language. And the left has assiduously, for many years now, done everything it can to take the language away. And that's basically saying, okay, we have all the weapons now, you'll just have to shut up. So that's why I don't, you'll hear me being very careful about the way I say things. I'm very careful. I don't like to use words like transphobia or homophobia, because they're just social intolerance. And I'm very careful about the way, I don't like hearing people saying, assigned a particular gender at birth. You weren't assigned any fucking gender at birth. The doctor looked at you, had a cock, you're a guy, you had a vagina, you're a woman. That's as simple as that. A girl, right? Simple as that. Whether you grow up into the conventional adult forms, well, that's different. That's different. Of gender associated with your birth sex, that's different. That we can't predict that at the time of birth. But what we can say is, yes, there's something dangling between your legs, looks like a cock and two balls to me, you're male. Basic stuff, you know. But again, this is where you find the left constantly trying to undermine the ability of those who are reasonable to debate with them and to challenge their assertions, simply by taking away the language. You know, you say to a transgender, and yes, it can be a noun. Some dictionaries do define it that way. If you say to a transgender person, but you were born male, they'll go, oh no, I was assigned feminine, I was assigned masculine at birth. Bollock, it's just a lie. It's just, you see what they're doing? They're going, nah. I was only, somebody just said I was a thing. It's not really real. Well, it is real. You see, there are real things. Sex is real. If you were born with a cock, you're male. In all but 1 in 20,000 roughly cases. Right? So for most of us, it's not an issue. It's an easy call to make. Not only is it an easy one, it's an accurate one to make. So the attempts to hijack language, which is all political correctness really is, these are things that we have to roll it back. We've let them go too far. We've let them go far too far in their relentless hijacking and appropriation of language. I mean, the left talks about cultural appropriation. The greatest appropriators of all are the left, because they appropriate language. There's no such thing as cultural appropriation. It doesn't exist, because there's no such thing as cultural ownership, right? I don't know, some of you maybe have noticed that today I'm wearing a suit, but sometimes if it's hot I like to wear a kilt, because I'm Scottish, right? If you wear a kilt and you're not Scottish, is that cultural appropriation? Oh, fuck off, of course it isn't. I don't have any right in the kilt. I just happen to think it's comfortable and it's part of my culture. Yahoo, you know? If I don't have a right to something, you can't appropriate it. You know? It's not because the sense of appropriation they mean is actually what they mean is not appropriation, they mean misappropriation, right? The miss is silent, you know? So often with the left, the actual important bit is silent. And it's just another example of how they take language and they abuse it so that other people cannot express an opposing point of view. And we have to fight it. We have to fight it all the way. Language is important. Ideas are important. This matters. Our culture is the best one on the planet. And it's in an existential crisis at the moment, and we have to fight. I mean fight. You know, the most important thing facing Western culture just now is not global warming or climate change. It's the rot from the inside of people who want to destroy it. And those people are here already. And we're going to have to get rid of them. Cheers. Thought for the day.